This podcast was brought to you by Meros Cryptocurrency. Meros is a cryptocurrency payment system that does what cryptocurrency originally intended to do. Be a practical and secure form of direct payment, Meros utilizes the best of current technology in a powerful new way. It introduces a groundbreaking consensus mechanism called merit caching. This enables Meros to be both feeless and instant while maintaining the same level of integrity of traditional networks like Bitcoin. To find out how you can participate in the future of crypto payments, go to meroscrypto.io now.
Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros. With me, your host Cryptosi, and today I am joined by none other than the lead developer for Meros, Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Just happy to be back here as always. We really have great conversations, and I'm happy to be talking about the project, sharing it with the people. Yes,
well, we've got an absolutely packed podcast coming up. I'm hoping that we can get through all of these questions. This is our June update, and as you know, we try to get them out at the beginning of every month. So this is our June update, hot on the heels of our May update. And I'm going to go straight into the questions, Kayaba. And well, it's not really a question, it's more of a public service alert. It was apparently someone special's birthday, and they reached the ripe old age of 1. Happy birthday to the Meros project. Kayaba, how does it feel to have made it this far? And do you think the project has progressed as quickly and as completely as you were planning when you started?
Honestly, I'm just really happy to even got in here. Over my life, I've worked on a few projects, but none have gripped me like Meros. I really think Meros has the potential to do a lot of good in simplifying and enabling people to use financial systems easily. And I'm just really happy to have gotten so far, to be able to spin up a working testnet, to have a secure code base. There's still a lot more to do, of course, but I'm just really happy to be this far along. When it comes to speed, it's kind of a mixed bag. I was hoping we'd be a bit closer to the end, but looking back, I also think it's progressed a lot, really, really far for really a single dev working for a year, building this competent code base.
When have you started the timer? When do you consider the actual birth of Meros, and what actually happened on that day?
So the first commit on GitHub was May 20th, and that's kind of when the time war started. I wanted to build a cryptocurrency for a while before that. I've been talking with a friend about necessities. There were a couple that were mentioned that we didn't end up incorporating yet, such as privacy and sharding, but we really said it needs to be instant, it needs to be feeless, and started writing some code, and I pushed on 20th. And over those following months, won't lie, a lot of mistakes were made. If you look at the early code, there's just a lot of obvious things I glanced over. I spent too much time working on one thing when I should have just done another thing. But really, May 20th, I would say.
Awesome. The thing that really stands out about the work that you've actually done is that from my knowledge of developers that I speak to, a lot of them tend to complain about the things that other projects are doing. And not to say that you don't complain about the things that other projects are doing, because to be fair to you, you quite regularly do. But with your work, it's actually, you actually have something to compare with. You actually are building something of your own. So other guys or other developers, guys or girls, they do sometimes say, oh, well, Dash has done this and that's crappy, or PivX has done this and that's crappy. Whereas you, on the other hand, you're actually doing something. And I think it's really, I think it puts you a step ahead of other developers in the industry, especially that when you do say things to me like, oh, PivX is crappy, or something is crappy that I quite like, I can then say to you, oh, well, what about Meros? And it's good that you've actually now got something that the world can actually look at. It's been open source from the start, and it's awesome. And I'm really, really quite pleased with all the work that you've done. So So yeah, just like to say that, really.
Thanks. So yeah, definitely, I do criticize some other projects that frustrate me, and I try to keep my arguments reasoned. I look for updates, making sure I'm not working off dated info. And honestly, I think most developers try their best. There's obviously the scammers and the people who are trying their best but incompetent, just so incompetent. But I do think most try their best, and I never try to attack the developers personally. I think the only time I've ever done that is with Ethereum Classic, where one of the main devs is the very, very, very likely DAO hacker. But anyways, so it definitely has brought on a different side of things now that I've started my own project. I remember arguing with some people about something like, okay, so what are you doing about it? I'm like, yeah, I built my own cryptocurrency to solve this. So I'm definitely happy to have this in front of me.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about this month and what's been going on in the past month. So as we did kind of guess that this month would be taken up by smaller things. So this month, what the bulk of the work, it seems, has been on documentation, going by what's been added to the GitHub, and also the tri-weekly update, which was brilliant. Again, this I think we actually got two in. The tri-weekly updates were pretty good. So could you tell us a little bit about the documentation that was put together during this past month? What parts of Meros have you now documented, and why have you decided to document them?
So we documented the protocol. If someone wanted to build a competing Meros implementation, they now have the documentation needed to achieve that. We documented each of the messages, how everything interacts. We detailed how Meros specifically handles a couple of things, what Meros has yet to implement. So really, we just tried to create a singular set of docs for the protocol. And the reason for this is because in the past, this has just been all in heads and discussion. And now that it's in a single organized place, we can really look at the complex behavior by pieces connecting and make sure we didn't miss something, make sure that each part is properly secured and remains secure when pieced together. We can accept edits more easily because there's a way to view it without saying, hey, how is X handled, and trying to talk to someone working on it. So it really just provides a great way for us to know what we have to do to move forward, not to make a higher quality node, but to make a working Meros node.
Awesome. Interesting that you said about people having competing implementations of Meros. How do you feel about people actually forking Meros? Well, like once it's completed and it's hit mainnet, how do you feel about people forking it? It seems like you're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to fork it. Do you not see forks as competition, or how do you view that likely scenario?
So Meros is released under the MIT license. That means you can fork it, and as long as you give credit and you can really do whatever you want. Hell, you could even sell Meros commercially as long as you give credit thanks to the MIT license. And there is a more restrictive license called the GPL license, which require that all forks also be under the GPL license. And my personal policy has always been GPL creates projects, MIT creates innovation. If someone wants to fork Meros, it's been available since day one, and they have a permissive license that lets them. And I would love to see a fork. It would help me keep on my toes. It would allow people to try out different things. It would get community opinion just by the different sets of users. And really, if we go beyond a fork of Meros, but a completely new implementation, that creates a more secure ecosystem, because if it bugs in one, it may not be in the other. And that means at least part of the network could stay alive. And especially since I wrote the node in NIM, it was a personal choice. I really just think NIM's a great language, and it's really just helped me continue developing without getting too stressed out some days. So the thing about NIM, though, is a lot of developers don't know it, and as I've gone and written some more complex behavior into Meros, NIM has shown its youth and had some bugs. So another implementation could help get more developers and theoretically create more language stability. Because while I am confident in the binaries that NIM produces, don't get me wrong, there have been moments where the NIM compiler doesn't like some of the behavior that we try to code. And we have to wait a week to get a bug fix or manually fix it ourselves.
Interesting, super interesting. Okay, I want to move on. I want to speak about something that I read in the most recent tri-weekly update. The tri-weekly updates, I like to say this every single podcast we do, but they are available on Medium. I will put a link in the description. They are awesome. Just another way to digest information about what's happening. Generally, I like to pick up on topics from the tri-weekly update that I find very interesting, that I think that we should discuss, but there might be parts that I've not picked up on that other listeners may decide are interesting to them. So I do urge you all to check out the tri-weekly update. Anyway, the last tri-weekly update did hint at possible delays to the mainnet. Now, why is there possibly going to be a delay to the mainnet, and is there anything that the community can do to help speed up the process?
So currently we're working on matching the protocol, working node before an easy node per se. But of course, making the node function according to the specified Meros protocol doesn't mean it's impossible to use. It's not adding difficulty. We're just saying we're not working on all the niceties and, say, encrypted wallets right now. We're working on just getting it functioning according to the specified protocol. And I do think that we could likely get that done before the end of Q2, which is when we wanted to launch the mainnet. That said, even if we get it done by then, we still have to have code-based reviews. I wanted to get an audit before launch, but due to the cost of an audit and the time it takes, what we're more likely to end up doing at this point is get few developers in the field to really look over Meros, give their personal feedback, note any securities, and use that as sort of an interim stage and do the audit a few months after launch. And of course, we would supplement that with a comprehensive test suite where the test actually tests valid and invalid behavior on its own to make sure the protocol is adhered to and you can't create any invalid input and get an invalid output in response. So that's what we're working on. We're working on getting the protocol up to date, and we can likely do that in time. But in order to fully test it and get developers to review it and to do the proper test nets, that's where we're looking at the delay. And then beyond that, just because we have a working node doesn't mean we have a node that's easy to use that we're happy with. If you pull up the Meros GUI right now, if you were to compile the node, it allows you to create a wallet, allows you to send funds, and allows you to manually specify to receive funds. That's really all it does. Every time I compile Meros, I may play around with the GUI or use it to create a wallet, but I really end up using the RPC for everything. I'll just write a script that executes the needed RPC commands, and I'll work off that. But that's obviously not okay for the end user. If I was to go to all our members in our community, a lot of them would say, what the heck is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And there was a discussion on Discord about this, about do we want a GUI at launch? Would we prefer an earlier launch with a command line interface? How do we want to handle this? So that's still up in the air. But between getting the node to meet the protocol, getting all the needed tests written and working correctly, getting developers to review the code base, doing the needed test nets, and potentially getting a GUI done, there's just a lot of work and a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, it's really interesting because two things I picked out there as you were speaking was firstly the GUI. Now, I believe Monero was around for a long while before it actually had a GUI, and I'm quite sure you're quite familiar with Monero, and they didn't seem to really suffer for not having a GUI. I do accept that crypto was very different back then to what it is now, but do you feel like that kind of non-GUI, GUI later approach can really hurt the project? How do you go about deciding whether or not it will be worth a delay to have a GUI. How do you decide that?
It depends on, one, could we get a GUI done? I personally am not a GUI. If we would want to bring in or receive a GUI developer, and that can cost a lot of money depending if they want to just volunteer, if they're interested in some Meros, if they're saying they want a flat fee in Bitcoin. So it really first depends on even one, if we can get a GUI done without launching the project for further funding. Then it depends on the quality of the CLI interface, command line interface, as well as how long we would be expecting to work off the command line interface. I think if your project has a command line interface for 6 months to a year, yeah, that can be damaging. But if we're talking 1 month, no, that would probably be feasible. And I guess in the end, it really depends on what the community says. A lot of our community members have been great in showing their support and saying, we're fine with a mainnet delay if it means getting a proper GUI at launch. And because of that, I am currently leaning towards delaying until we have a competent GUI, even if it's not the most beautiful, before we launch.
That does sound fair enough. So I guess we could use this platform to put out a call to any community members who know any GUI devs, I guess, to come into the Discord and make themselves known to you if they want to volunteer their services towards making the Meros front end. Would that be helpful?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Would it be helpful if any community members knew any GUI devs to tell them to come forward to the Discord, the Meros Discord, so that they could make themselves known and possibly help out building the GUI for Meros?
Oh, definitely. So our GUI is set up with WebView. It's kind of like the Chromium embedded framework, which is the basis of Electron and React. And it basically provides a web browser. So that means we're coding the GUI in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and really would benefit to have someone who's able to code these and willing to work through the kinks involved with us. I don't have that much per se for a Bitcoin fee, but I would definitely be interested in providing some Meros bounties if anyone wanted to come forward, and that would help speed things along. I've also been talking with another group of developers who are interested in providing a GUI. We're currently just discussing the theory and seeing if we can get a prototype of the library they want to use when running on WebView because they have interest in it for another project. We haven't signed an agreement or anything, but we may end up going with them. But even if we work with those developers, we'll still make sure it's open source and anyone could jump in.
Yeah. So I'm actually privy to the GitHub. I check it out quite regularly, and there is already a WebView section in the Meros project. So I guess people can go and keep an eye on that as things develop. You're known for your transparency, so I'm assuming things will be there. The other point that you brought up, which I thought was quite interesting, was talking about code audits. Now, in light of recent things happening, such as the ZeroCoin break-in, and that had plenty of peer review prior to being found to be faulty, do you feel like code audits are really worth the amount of respect that they garner? Considering that once you put a network live and there's actually money behind it, then you kind of get the real kind of battle-hardened networks that are constantly under attack by people who are truly incentivized to attack it. Do you feel that kind of lessens the need for a code audit, or how do you actually see those two things in comparison with each other?
I think because releasing a network puts real money behind it increases the need for code review. I feel like a lot of cryptocurrency developers have said, oh, hey, I can code somewhat. I took a class 3 years ago. Let me release something in cryptocurrency because it will be easy money. I feel like a lot of developers just aren't quality developers, and they'll release shoddy projects, which will lead to a loss of funds, and that really is something that frustrates me. And I don't want to be a part of that scene. I think that code reviews aren't perfect. I mean, you could arguably say ZeroCoin is a proof of that, but I feel like in the end it was ZeroCoin's cryptography, not its code, that really broke it. So that also changes things. But I think a code review can't hurt more than it helps.
Yeah.
So it is still beneficial to perform and helpful. And I feel like we should do all we can to protect the money that we're putting into this system.
Awesome. It's very, very pragmatic approach. So appreciate your time on that. I'm done with my questions, so I'm going to go onto the community questions. We had loads this month, so unfortunately, I'm definitely not going to be able to get through all of them this month. But please do not let you be deterred. I'm speaking to the listeners now. Don't let you be deterred. Keep on putting the questions into the Discord. There's a channel there, state of the project channel. Put your questions in there, and hopefully, as the months go by, we'll get through them all. So the first question, it was a question from a young man who I know quite well called Getz. And Getz asks, is pruning possible within Meros? Or will SPV or light nodes, are they possible?
This podcast has been brought to you by Rhubarb Media. Rhubarb Media are the branding specialists behind successful crypto projects such as PivX, Vendible, and Libertaria. The Rhubarb style is both loved and respected the world over. So if you want your project to appeal to techies and everyday users alike, give Rhubarb Media a try. You cannot possibly be disappointed. Link is in the description.
So pruning, if you download the entire database, everything, what really you end up with is you end up with the blockchain. You end up with a DAG of all the actions needed for consensus, all the verifications and so on. And you end up with a second DAG, which is all the transactions. So starting with the transactions level, as long as you keep the sends, which have yet to be received, the equivalent of an unspent transaction output in Bitcoin. So we have send entries. If you create one, someone else has to create a receive entry. So as long as you mark send entries that can still be received, yes, you can prune those entries from that DAG. And then when it comes to the consensus DAG, which counts as votes, verifications, really that sort of stuff, it's detailed in the protocol, but really most of it's going to be verifications. We only talk about every time a block comes by, it archives everything from 0 to X on the merit holder's account. So because of that, you can theoretically prune everything before X as long as you keep track of the last 6 blocks. The last 6 blocks should be enough. So yeah, anyways, there's definitely room for pruning on each of our DAGs. There is not room on the blockchain as that's really needed. That said, when it comes to running a light node, you can only download the block headers instead of the actual blocks. By only downloading the block headers and parts of the blocks, not all of them, you'll be able to receive who has merit and who doesn't. And then you can ask for votes for a specific entry, see if it got verified or not. So yes, some of it can be pruned. Yes, it is possible to create a light node. Because of how complex our system is, you really need to double check what you're pruning, double check if you have enough data to run a trustless light node, but it is possible. That said, Meros will not include pruning or a light node option in the Meros implementation itself, because I personally believe that Meros is built to be a full node. Full nodes are the backbone of the network, and it's important to get a lot out there. So Meros is going to prioritize being a full node. If I would totally be up for creating a light wallet implementation, I know if we created a mobile wallet, we would have to. But the current Meros implementation itself will never include pruning or light wallet functionality. That would be a separate project.
Awesome. I'd be very interested in seeing light nodes. Obviously, I do like the concept of full nodes, but unfortunately, I see sometimes they can't be implemented in places where they don't have the technology that we have in the Western world. So I'd like to see a mobile wallet as well. But I do appreciate the approach that you're taking to make sure that we do have enough full nodes, as they are the most important part.
Light Wallet is one of our top priorities, especially one which has invoicing support. So if you're a store clerk, all you have to do is get a mobile wallet. You don't have to get a dedicated hardware. You don't have to set something up on a computer. You just take out your phone and say, okay, here's my QR code, and it kind of tracks what the payment was for and how much it was. So that is one of our top priorities as we move into the future.
Awesome to hear. Right, the next question was from a guy called Nothing Is Magic. And he asked in our Discord, he asked, are you aiming for an IEO? I think you've covered this before in other podcasts that we've had, but go ahead and answer the question. Are you aiming for an IEO?
So I think ICOs are immoral because they're selling marketing. They're not selling code. So I personally said I would not do an ICO, and I don't plan to. When it comes to IEO, it changes things. If you do an IEO of a live network, then it's not selling marketing. It is actually selling the code, or a mix of both, but as best as you can get. The thing is that IEOs are just ICOs done by exchanges, and they really do not change anything in the eyes of the SEC. The only thing they change is the name. They just slapped an E instead of a C in there. It is the SEC, they go through a list of questions on determining if something is a security. And one of them is it a functional network? If the network is already live and you're selling it, that you're selling it does not necessarily make it a security. So, but that applies to both ICOs and IEOs, theoretically, depending on when you time them. So, really, IEOs are just a new word for ICO, where an exchange handles the KYC. I'm not personally a fan of them, and I said I wanted to do an ICO, and really that applies to an IEO too.
Okay, awesome. So how will you be funding things that you do with Meros? What is the plan behind that?
Just because there won't be an IEO doesn't mean that we won't occasionally sell off small amounts of Meros on an exchange. Of course, we wouldn't dump all of the pre-mined, 50% of the pre-mine. No, we're not insane. We want the price to go up. I believe that Meros will be worth more and more, and it would be foolish of me to sell this early, especially after putting so much work into it. That said, the Meros we receive in the pre-mine isn't just meant for Meros bounties. Part of it will be sold in fragments over a time period. Of course, once we award a Meros bounty, that person may sell it themselves. So the pre-mine will be distributed in Meros. Part of it will be sold. We'll make sure that we don't cause massive price fluctuations, try to time it over a few days if we're selling a decent amount. But we will sell portions of that.
Awesome. All right, the next question was from Anon. And he or she asks, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin reaching $6,900? Now, obviously, it's gone up a little bit since then, but I guess the question really is, what are your thoughts on the price of Bitcoin and it going up recently?
It's definitely exciting. It's kind of symbolizing that we're leading out of the bear market into a new bull market, which is why I'm excited for Meros to be launching so soon. That said, I don't personally hold any Bitcoin. I mean, I'd love to, but I really had to sell it all during the crash. So the price doesn't affect me that much. So really, I'm excited because it shows people are starting to trust Bitcoin again and people are buying it yet again. And I'm excited for what that means as an industry. But the price doesn't affect me, and I don't really check it that often because of that. I just try to check if we're exiting the bear market or not, and I think we are.
Awesome. With the pricing of Bitcoin and your thoughts towards it, is it safe? Well, I'll answer it as a question rather than a statement. Is Bitcoin more important to you as a technology, or is it more important to you as a source of income?
So when I started freelancing years ago, I used to work on freelancer sites, but those just really didn't create much income. But then with cryptocurrency, not only were people paying because people were making money. It was really just going up and up. But it also allowed me to get paid as a miner. And because I didn't have to deal with any PayPal restrictions, I didn't have to deal with getting parental approval or something.
Sorry, Kayaba, when you say as a miner, you mean not as a person who was mining Bitcoin?
No,
you
someone
mean as a person
under 18.
Right,
Someone under 18.
okay. Let me just clarify that. Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead.
So Bitcoin became the way to get paid. It's just really the only way I could freelance back in the day. And I quickly switched to technology more suitable for currency like Ethereum. But Bitcoin, to me, symbolizes the entire market. I think as a currency, it doesn't have much value because it's slow and costs money. I think the Lightning Network does a lot, but I don't think a second layer should be needed to enable a currency to be a currency. I just don't think it's a currency. So the technology to me is symbolic. You want to respect your elders, you know? And I think it does have value as a store value like gold, but I don't personally see it as a beacon of the technology of tomorrow anymore versus a beacon of the start of the technology of tomorrow. And I just keep track of the price to represent the industry price, which symbolizes if we're in a bear or bull market and how the people feel about it. Because, of course, if Bitcoin is worth $1 million, everyone likes it. But if it's worth $10, only the most devout like it.
Yeah, I get you. It was a very interesting take on it, actually. The next questions, I'll see if I can try and squeeze these last two in, actually. So, very aware of the time. We're running out of time, but thank you for giving us this time this month, as always. So this question comes in from a person known to our Discord simply by name. And this person, who I'm quite sure is actually a developer themselves, they ask, will you have sharding? And if so, how? Since you've previously stated that you want your system to be untiered.
So untiered in this case refers to master nodes and so on, which aren't necessarily needed for sharding, but yeah. So arguably the system's already tiered. I mean, we have users and we have merit holders. Merit holders being anyone who got part of a block, the merit mined in a block. So arguably there's already a bit of a tier system, but no, we will not have sharding at launch. It's just too big of a task. And I don't have the knowledge to create a successful system on my own, and I don't want to release a system I don't feel competent about. I don't want to try writing experimental tech that just isn't my expertise. So we will not have sharding at launch. And my hope is that in the future we'll be able to rework Meros, introduce some new features like sharding to add a lot of scalability and maybe some privacy tech. But we're not talking about this at launch, and we're likely not talking about this for the first year either. It's just not on the immediate schedule and not on for the schedule for next year or two to really do anything more than consider. And the reason why everyone likes sharding is because of the scalability it offers. And I understand that currencies must be scalable to function. So in the case of Meros, we enable second layers. And that kind of goes back on what I was saying about Lightning. A currency shouldn't need a second layer to be a currency. Here I am saying Meros needs a second layer to scale. So I understand how that's a bit hypocritical. But my policy is that Meros won't need to scale early on. There is still fiat currency. The world economy hasn't collapsed. There's plenty of other cryptocurrencies. We're young blood. It's going to take a few years to see serious cheap transactions per second. And my hope is that we can just be fast enough. We can be fast enough to deliver high enough TPS that we need for the first year or two.
Yeah.
And after that, then we would look at forking to a sharded design. And we'd want to fork at the time when we need sharding, we have sharding. Not when we need sharding, we start sharding. But if we end up not being able to deliver sharding on time, we still can theoretically scale via a second layer. Yeah. So we at least have that. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't dooming my cryptocurrency to be unscalable without direct hard forks.
Excellent. Okay, so the next question by the same developer, and he says, why would a miner include a transaction into a block if there is no reward for them?
So to clarify, there is a reward. When you include a transaction into a block, your score goes up by 1 if that transaction gets verified. If it goes verified, your score goes up by 1. And after 6 blocks, we look at every transaction that was first verified in the block from 6 blocks ago, and we say, all these people verified all these transactions, and they got A has a score of 5, B has a score of 3, C has a score of 6. So with the numbers 5, 3, and 6, that creates a total score of 14. And then we also work off their amount of merit. It's not as long as you have merit, you get money. No, it's if you have more merit, you get more Meros. So we take the score, we multiply it by their Meros, and we quote-unquote normalize it. We make it so all of them add up to 1,000. And we use that to distribute Meros. So if you don't include transactions, if you don't include any, then the block will be empty. If the block's empty, there's no one to give a score to, so there's no Meros emitted. If you do include transactions, but only some, then others will include a lot more transactions and they'll get a higher amount. If you wanted to monopolize this and only can create a few transactions, yet still get a ton of Meros, you'd have to mine 6 blocks straight and still get majority approval on the 5th block. Every 5 blocks, we have checkpoints to stop 51%, help stop 51% attacks. Basically, instead of needing 51% of the hash power, you need 51% of the merit, which requires 51% of the hash power for an entire year.
Yeah.
So there is a reward in that it bumps up your score, which bumps up how much Meros you get, and it can't be manipulated without really just having way too much hash power and way too much merit via having too much hash power for an extended period of time, which is extremely costly and has plenty of time to give the community to react.
It's not really something I can see happening anytime soon. So
especially
I wouldn't worry about
CPU mineable. So
yeah. Okay, right. So well, I guess that's it. That's all we've got time for on this month. It's really, really flown by. There was a few questions we didn't get through, so I'm going to tack them onto the July update. Hopefully we'll get some answers from you there on those topics. Standard questions before we go, though, actually. What are you going to be working on for the next month for Meros?
For the next month, we're going to be working on making sure the node meets the protocol. There were a few... trying to think of the best word to use. There are a few messages that got by that basically said, hey, how many entries does this person have? How many transactions does this person have? And we don't support those because we only sync what's mentioned of the blockchain. If you look on the blockchain, you can get that data. So they're used for syncing data outside the blockchain, not technically needed, but extremely useful. So we're kind of trying to make sure we handle those fluff messages, fluff's a good word, along with some other messages we miss. So that's really our focus for the next month, just making sure making sure our node meets the protocol and creating tests to verify that.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to tell everybody before we go?
Just that I'm thankful to be here and excited that Meros hit its 1-year birthday, and I'm excited for the future.
Awesome. Kayaba, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Really, really excited about this project and looking forward to the July updates and the tri-weekly updates as well. So thank you again very much for your time. For everybody who's listening, thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe. And this podcast should be available on Spotify, Android and iTunes and YouTube. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you, Kayaba, next month, and looking forward to all of you guys tuning in again to hear State of the Project Meros. Thank you.
Thank you.
This show is brought to you by PivX, Private Instant Verified Transactions. With its groundbreaking zero coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex, and for more information, go to www.pivex.org.